Because even us talking in front of a camera, doing this podcast, would you say you're being your 100% full authentic self right now in this moment?
My authentic self is
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. We are so happy to be here. It's been a while.
been a while.
It's been a long
We
while.
moved to San Diego and we unpacked stuff and we are here sitting in our living room floor because our couch is on the way. It should be arriving
Yes.
next week.
Yes, we are. So, this episode, if you clicked or tapped on it, we're talking about authenticity. And this is literally like the most real. Like, we have no couch, we don't have a TV stand. In the back is a box as our TV stand.
Very makeshift.
And yeah, just to be real, we might be a bit rusty because it's been like over a month or month and a half since we've actually recorded. We're going to record this episode. We're recording before the previous week's episode because it's top of mind. So just being super transparent, give us some grace as we kind of ease back in. But yeah, today's topic we are so excited to talk about because it's about being your full, authentic, real self. And I mean, do you want to kick us off? Like, why did you bring this topic up?
Yeah, I think the problem today is people are feeling like, why can't I be myself? Or why does it
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm not myself?
Right. How does that show up though? Like, how do people experience that the most?
I think
This is becoming an interview.
it really shows up in like even like your feelings when you are in a work environment, for example, or you're hanging out with friends or whatever group of people, you feel like, hmm, I feel like I'm putting on a mask. This is a little exhausting.
Right.
Maybe there's a sense of shame, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe I have to pretend to be someone I'm not to fit in. Maybe I don't even know myself, and there's like a
Yeah.
disconnect.
Yeah.
So we tend to disassociate ourselves. So those are some of the basic ways that it kind of shows up
Yeah.
with putting on a mask, with disconnecting from yourself, et
It can
cetera, et
it can
cetera.
even look like I think some people normalize it because we don't really talk about this a lot like in society. So oftentimes we'll normalize, oh, I just have like social anxiety. Like before you go to an event, you're like, I mean, we get that too. Like before we go to events as introverts, we're like, oh my gosh, okay, gotta like connect with my real self, be confident, I don't need to pretend to be someone I'm not. But that's like also kind of like an example of, you feel this pressure to be someone you're not. Or you're like, okay, I gotta like do the version that is gonna please the most people. Or how do I camouflage? How do I adjust myself um to fit into this environment, And I think that's very normal. It's like almost like a human survival mechanism, I guess, of like, okay, this is the context. What am I getting myself into? How do I equip myself with all the right things to survive in this context? But the
Hmm.
problem is when we treat everything like that and we're chronically worried about what do people think? How are they going to perceive me? Like, to the point where we don't even realize we're not being our true selves. And personally for me, I mean, Alex has helped me so much in lovingly calling me out in my performance roots. So for those who don't know, I grew up doing like ballet and dance and all sorts of different genres.
10 years of ballet was very traumatizing.
More than 10 years. Yeah. It was like
Oh, okay.
from I would say around age 3 all the way till I mean into college I danced too. So
3?
yeah, like I
You
started
danced
with
when you were 3?
I think 3 or 4. Like Chinese starts with Chinese dance, anyone else who knows, if you know, you know. Chinese dance, ballet, lyrical, jazz, tap, and then every recital, you have
Okay.
like multiple recitals. And then every time it's a recital time, you train yourself to smile throughout the entire dance. And when you practice dancing, the teacher also tells you make sure to smile, make sure to smile. So it's like it's not a bad thing, of course. Like you don't
Hmm.
want to, as an audience member, you don't want to watch a show where people aren't, looking they're looking glum and solemn and stuff. But Again, the problem is when that carries over into life. And I have to say personally, I've been on a journey, especially these past few years, but especially this past year, of seeking. I was like, I just feel like something's off. Like, who am I? And then I got into this whole like identity crisis. Who am I? Like, who's my real self? Where do I even start? And then I remember many people asking me, and I've been hearing this question over and over again, which is why I was like, yes, let's do this topic, from many people about, so what does it even mean? Like, what helps you find and discover your authentic self? And I was like, do you have an hour to talk? Because there's a lot
I have a question
that
about
goes
that.
into that. Yeah.
Why does it even matter to be your authentic self?
Yeah. Well, I want to hear your thoughts on that after I answer your rhetorical question. But I think what I've noticed about myself, and you can comment on this, is I feel a lot more alive. Like, I feel
Hmm.
like free. It's hard
Hmm.
to describe until you actually like live it out, but it's like I'm no longer trapped when I'm in situations. I mean, sometimes I am. Like, there's still many times I am, but I'm not as trapped as I used to be, not nearly as trapped. Um, because I used to feel this like pressure to like turn it on, like just like dance, like smile and like do the facial expression that is the most comfortable for other people, if that makes sense, or
Hmm.
will make the best impression towards others. So I think that's a big part of it, is like that freedom, that liberty, the liberation, and not just that, but then you're also then able to hear clearly, what is God telling me, versus like feeling like you need to mold yourself, and it even affects what you kind of choose to hear from God, if that makes sense. But what are your thoughts on why is it important to be your authentic self?
Well, authenticity means real,
Mhm.
it's genuine, and Satan is the father of lies. So,
Mm,
if you are
that's good.
living an inauthentic life, you are living a lie. And God does not want us to live a lie. So,
Mic drop.
with all that said, I think the problem in today's society is people generally don't feel safe being themselves. Why else would people feel like not free? It's because when people aren't free, they feel trapped, and they feel trapped because they don't feel safe,
Right.
either with themselves or with others. An example, I remember my cousin, like 10 years. He's my oldest cousin, and I was like 16 or 17, and he actually encouraged me to eat meals by myself. And this was when I was interning out of state, and he just encouraged me to find my own skin, or be safe, or be comfortable in my own skin. So um, I say that example because for many people, eating by themselves is not easy. It's weird. It's even when we were in the Bay Area, and one of our last meals, we were at this like noodle restaurant, and we saw a lot of people eating by themselves, and they had it on AirPods, or they were on their phones, and it just goes to show that, well, one, we're distracted and we like content, but two, it feels weird being by ourselves. Maybe it's something unsettling about just being with you. It's a strange feeling, but at the same time, I think it builds a lot of confidence in who you are.
Also heard from many people about um how technology has changed that, has like exacerbated that, because now that we have phones and the internet and like all, there's always something to look at and like draw our attention to, versus in the past previously it's like you don't have a choice but to be with yourself and your thoughts and other people around you. So I definitely think it's like an increasing problem in our society of like, you're afraid to be with yourself and you don't know who your true self is. You're disconnected from that sense of self because your attention is always towards the outside, like the world, the news, social media, other people. There's always something to distract yourself with. So yeah, I like what you said about how the enemy is like the father of lies. And basically, by distracting us from knowing our true selves, he also prevents us from living out our true calling, our true purpose, and also being honest with ourselves and with God and others. And that is such a big part of healing those wounds that are inside you, healing, bringing light and truth into your life. It's so easy to cover things up and cover sin up, but also just cover secrets and shame and guilt and all the things when we just like turn aside and like turn a blind eye. But I really feel, just going back to your point about like, when you're disassociated, it's like it's a fragmented version of ourselves that we've become so used to. And we wear these masks that we're so used to wearing. We forget that we're wearing masks, when the invitation from God is to be like, come as you are, and like you can let down your mask. You don't have to wear a mask, and let me show you how to be whole again. Because I wrote this in a social media post earlier today, but like the word integrity, the root is integer, and that means wholeness. And so by
Oh, dang.
being by being a person of integrity, if you want to be a person of integrity, that means being able to be your full whole self, no matter what situation you're in, no matter who the people around you are. And that's really, really hard to do, to be honest. Like we struggle with it still,
Yeah,
like,
we're not perfect.
yeah,
We have our own insecurities
right,
and masks that we put up too,
yeah.
depending on who we're around.
But I would say we've come a lot farther versus where we both used to be.
Oh yeah,
And
I was
yeah,
a different person 10 years ago.
yeah.
Yeah. I want to also talk about this biblically too. So in I'm looking at my notes. But in Genesis 2:25, it talks about Adam and Adam and his wife Eve were both naked and they felt no shame. And this was before the fall, before they ate the fruit from the tree. And before that, they were super happy and they were content in God, and there was peace and everything was good. Things were working according to their original design. But after they did the thing that God told them not to do, they actually hid. And so there was shame, and they covered themselves too, which is so interesting. So,
And what's interesting about that is they didn't even hide because they felt it says, if you read the passage, it says they hid because they were naked. It's not even because they hid because they disobeyed God.
yeah, they hid because they were naked, and they were naked before.
Right.
So
Right.
after the fall, they felt shame,
About
and
their nakedness.
they felt shame about their nakedness.
Yeah. So it's like oftentimes we're like, oh, I, I just feel like it just says, it speaks volumes about how the fall, yes, of course, it's like, sin was introduced into the world, but also shame was introduced. And it's like previously, just like you said, they were naked. They weren't ashamed of their nakedness. But then what, what sin did was made them feel ashamed of something that they shouldn't be ashamed of, which led them to hide from God. So that creates disconnect from God and disconnect from each other. And
Yeah, yeah, spot on. So, with all that said, it's super important to recognize whether you are actually living your authentic self, and it mainly comes in the form of questioning, am I, like, why do I feel like I can't be myself? There's something off. So I want to actually transition a little bit and talk about what are the causes of feeling like you can't be fully yourself, you can't be authentic. So I wrote down some notes. So excuse me, I haven't podcasted in a while, so I need to refer. So the first part is your parents and your upbringing. So working with some of my clients, they actually this is a more common struggle than we think. So I obviously won't give names or anything like that. But the theme I've seen is a cause for being disconnected with yourself and others is that you had to grow up really fast. And an example of this is maybe your parents unfortunately got a divorce when you were younger, or you had to take care of a family member or someone at a really young age, even though you didn't want to. Um,
or it could be just emotionally like a lot of emotional turmoil and dysregulation. It doesn't have to be something super dramatic like divorce either.
Yeah, yeah. Or it could be feeling like they had to take care of emotionally take care of their parents. Usually it's parents when you're older, but it really could be like a guardian or anything. I just use parents in this case. So because they've almost given themselves to taking care of others, they haven't thought of themselves. And as a young child, they need to be taken care of. It shouldn't be the other way. They're a child. They're not an adult yet. So
Right.
because of that, they're almost losing themselves. Their sense of self is eroding.
I think the term, if anyone's curious, I think the term is parentification. It's a big word. But yeah, if you were parentified as a kid, and that's very common, especially amongst if you're the oldest, if you're the only child. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't
we're
have to be,
we're
but
only children.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of pressure riding on you to be like, oh my gosh, I need to make sure my parents are okay or my family's okay, and I'm the glue, and everyone's depending on me. And then you kind of like you subconsciously just naturally take on the role of a parent for your parents.
Hmm.
Not all the time, but yeah.
Yeah, another term for this is disassociation. Maybe we mentioned it a few times before this. An example is when actually, my mom not had to, she chose to take care of my late grandmother who had dementia. And it felt like 10 years of taking care of her. Maybe it was less. I lost count on where the timeline was, but it's noticeably a long time. So my mom, she literally almost lost, actually she did lose herself in taking care of my grandmother, her mom. And if anyone here has dealt with a family member with dementia, it can be very frustrating and you feel really impatient. Just imagine, well, this is a side note, but just imagine you gave someone like some money to get groceries or like take care of yourself, but you lost your money. It's very common for that to happen. And that's happened many times with my grandmother, which obviously causes a lot of frustration. But the point of all this is my mom literally almost kind of died to herself, but not in a very healthy way. And she gave herself away to take care of my grandmother at every need that she had, whether it's the bathroom or just like making sure that she's okay.
Right.
And in that process, she lost who she was.
Well, that's common for I think all moms, especially
Mm,
after they give birth. I hear this a lot. Like we don't have kids yet, but I hear this a lot from new moms that they lose their sense of self after they have a kid because they're so dedicated. Now that you're a parent, your role is like, I need to make sure this thing stays alive. So you're like so obsessed and focused about that, which is not a bad thing, but it's like it's so easy to lose yourself and not take care of yourself, not to pay attention to your needs because your life now everything revolves around this child or multiple children especially. And yeah, I feel like I can empathize a lot because I mean I see that especially amongst Asian moms, I will say. Like this
totally.
is very common when the kid wants to leave the nest. They like get super anxious because they're like, I don't know what to do with myself. My identity is a mom, so my child is not here with me. Who am I? If my child isn't listening to what I have to say, isn't obeying my words,
Mm,
it creates a lot of anxiety for them because their identity is in that. And so I can relate or not relate, but I empathize because whatever your identity is wrapped in on, if something happens to disrupt that perceived identity that you have for yourself, of course you'll kind of like react and lash out. And that's painful for the child or whoever's on the other side because then they're like, I need freedom and I need to be my own self. But I think we see this a lot amongst Asian women, especially.
mm-hmm.
But
Definitely.
I think all women struggle with it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I can't I can't say, but I can't
Yeah,
affirm that.
but you've seen from your clients.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen, I've met enough women in my life to see this pattern.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not at that age where you're taking care of your parents, or maybe you're not a mom yet or a parent, but maybe you're in the middle. In that case, this is another cause for disconnecting and feeling like you can't be fully yourself. Is when you were growing up, your parents may have told you that you needed to be a certain way or behave a certain way, whether it's spoken or unspoken. And because of that, as a child, you held this deep belief that, oh, you needed to be that, you needed to exhibit this behavior, and anything that does not align with that belief just feels weird. It feels misaligned. And because of that, you aren't sure of who you are anymore because you grew up thinking, oh, I have to be this way, I need to be this, but who am I really? So now you're questioning
You,
a lot of
you
things.
feel like you're not allowed to be your true self because the people that you look up to or that you reference or refer to don't approve of that version of yourself.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
this applies to even peers, bullies, classmates, friends who made the wrong remarks when you're younger but didn't realize it. I was telling Alex the other day when we were on one of our walks, I was like, I suddenly remembered. I buried this memory so deep, I don't really think about it often, but I suddenly remembered, or God brought to mind, a friend back in, I think, middle school. Her, as well as someone else, another like boy in my class. I think he was like sitting next to me in class, and they just nonchalantly said to me a couple times, like, "You're so lame." And I remember asking,
No.
what's lame? And that's like the lamest response. But I just remember, when you're a kid, you don't realize the impact these comments have on you. But um, looking back, I can see how those comments, those similar comments, made little Grace feel like it's not acceptable to be who you really are because you're lame, like you're a dork, like no one likes you, you're not cool, you're not gonna fit in. So, how can you change yourself to not be lame Grace? Which sounds so sad to say. Because looking back, I was like inviting Jesus into that moment. I was like, okay, Jesus, you're with me. What were you saying to little Grace? And I was just so touched because I felt like Jesus was like, you are a weirdo and you're perfect. Like, I love you for being who you are. And those kids, like, don't even pay attention to those comments because it doesn't dictate your worth. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Wow.
but it
I,
all
I,
it all builds up over time.
yeah. Yeah. I hope those kids are, maybe they're just insecure back then.
Yeah. I think also back then, I don't know, kids just say dumb things. They don't even think about the consequences of what you say.
Yeah,
I've
they
said dumb
definitely don't.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. Me too.
I still say dumb things.
Yeah, I remember I punched someone in the face when I was a kid.
Wait, what? How do I
That's
not
a
know
that's
this?
that's another story.
Did I forget?
I was bullied, and even though I'm calm, I I have vengeful feelings too.
The Hulk version of Alex.
Yeah, yeah.
Dang.
So
Okay, then
yeah,
we'll unpack that another time.
yep, we both got in trouble. Him for bullying me and me for retaliating. Okay, I won't say his name. I hope he's doing all right. So yeah, I mean, even for me, there's been a lot of spoken and unspoken lies that have been ingrained in me. Like just big picture, a lie that I believe for a long time is extroverts are better than introverts. Nobody says it like that, but just the everything surrounding just all the systems and cultures and values of this world is kind of revolves around that. You see that in work meetings, you see that in talent shows, just yeah, it's just everywhere. And so for a while, I'm an introvert by the way, but for a while I just felt like, okay, I have to be more extroverted, I have to be more outspoken,
Yeah.
which isn't bad at all.
Right, right.
But I felt
It
like,
helps you in many scenarios.
yeah, it definitely
Yeah.
does help me in many scenarios. But I felt like that's not really me. I'm not like the life of the party, and I don't care to be. And even in work meetings, it always seems like the most talkative, loudest person gets the credit, or
Mhm.
they get promoted, or whatever, right?
Right.
And so for a while, I believed that I need to be more vocal. I need, again, not bad at all. You definitely need to be vocal. You have a voice for a reason. But I thought that I had a faulty personality, which is a
Mhm.
lie. And so that's just one example. Other examples, like very common is my parents wanted me to, and I said this many times before, but my parents wanted me to have a good, stable job. And for a while, I thought, how come the things that I'm interested in or good at don't make a lot of money?
Right.
um, like I'm not really passionate about engineering. I'm not passionate about like medical sciences or law or anything like that. I have surface level interest, but not like depth in those areas. And so I question, how come God didn't give these desires in me? And I thought, again, it's a faulty personality that I should believe in a certain thing, and that I should have these desires and these interests because everyone else seems to, but I don't.
Right. I think the bottom line, like everything you're talking about, is very relatable. And I think the bottom line is there's so many systems and structures in our world and culture that kind of there's like subliminal messaging that can be easily interpreted to the untrained mind. You should be this way, and being who you are is wrong. And so there's a lot of shoulds, there's a lot of narratives and scripts that we feel like we need to follow and stick to be accepted, to be loved, to be liked, or even to succeed in a worldly sense. Like as you were talking about the extroversion at work, I was just reminded of the phrase, at work, they always tell you, bring your full self to work. But who actually feel it's like so hard actually to feel safe enough in a workplace unless you're in a really really good culture, which they exist, but I think in general there's many more workplaces that don't feel safe enough to be your full authentic true self, because you have these walls and you're guarded about like, oh, how much can I actually share with people, and will they actually accept me, especially if you're a Christian. Can I actually bring my faith here, because it seems like a lot of people are anti-God and anti-Christian, and I don't want to be judged. So I feel like a lot of it, I mean, there's so many layers to it, but a lot of it just comes down to the fear of judgment and criticism, rejection, not belonging, because that kind of just points back to our own, like, our do we actually feel like we are okay to be who we really are, like that we don't know how to be safe, we don't know how to be accepted because we aren't there's a blockage somewhere internally around like actually understanding you're totally okay as you are. So it's hard to
Yeah.
unlearn this when most of us for decades this is deeply ingrained in us. And I will say, even for me, like a way this subconsciously or under the surface manifested was, for the longest time, it was reinforced that my false self has been reinforced, in terms of, everyone saying, oh my gosh, you're so high capacity, you're so responsible, you're a great leader, blah blah blah. And it's like, oh, so great, people actually like think good things about me, especially when you
Hmm.
combine that with my childhood wounds of my dad not approving of me, or not seeing those qualities in me at all. So
Yeah, it's like you're getting
um
the affirmation that you wanted and
right.
needed at the time.
Right. And it's also like no one's gonna be like, oh, don't be a leader, like don't be responsible. Like all those things are really good, but it's like, unknowingly I had taken on all those things, which were actually sometimes coping mechanisms. I had taken it on as my identity, my character, my personality, instead of my identity and worth and everything being rooted in being a child of God. To go back to your point about extroversion and introversion, um, one thing to note is it's not that is bad, or one's like, for example, extrovert qualities. This could be considered an extrovert quality. We're talking to an audience. Like, this is
Yep.
not a very natural. An introvert naturally would not do this.
Nope. Nope.
But because we have this like conviction and passion and purpose of like, we feel called that God wants us to share these things with a platform, we're going to push through that unnatural proclivity and turn on some extrovert aspects of ourselves for the sake of that purpose. You know what I mean? Or if God tells you to go on stage, or to speak up in a meeting, even if you're like scared to do it and it's not your natural wiring, it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I always have to just be quiet and shy. Like, there are moments where you can adopt the other quality. Same with if you're an extrovert and you love talking, you love, being the center of attention, but there are definitely many moments too where, God will whisper to you, hey, right now your role is to listen, and to learn more than speak and talk, and so I think the key is just not finding your identity in any of those qualities or traits, because that's the difference. It's like when we sometimes we're so like, oh, I have to be this way to be accepted, to be loved, to be liked, versus the mentality of like, I can adjust and accommodate, but it's not actually to please other people or to be approved of or to be successful. The end goal is I'm just doing what God is telling me to do, and you know using discernment to think about what do I need to use, right? What character traits do I need to leverage right now, that it's actually coming from an authentic place, even if it's not my authentic nature. Does that make sense? I'm trying to like break down the nuance of that,
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
don't want people to feel like, oh, being my authentic self means like I shouldn't be, if I'm an introvert, I shouldn't be extroverted ever. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean,
Or vice
one could
versa.
argue Jesus was an introvert because he did retreat many times to pray to his Father,
Right.
but he had to push through the crowds too.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, that's tricky, because I feel like
oh, he's God.
he's God, but also like everyone should have their solitude time too. It's a spiritual practice. So, yeah, that's actually a good example of like, if you're an extrovert, you love being around people. Maybe what's uncomfortable and unnatural to you is to be alone, but that's like part of how God calls us to be with him, is to not rely on the comfort of other people to give us a sense of self-worth, but to actually be okay being alone sometimes. And um yeah, even if it's like scary, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
anyway, sorry, this is a rapid trail.
yeah,
There's a lot more in there.
yeah. So, knowing that we feel this tension of, am I being my true self or I'm putting on a mask? You know, how does one even find and live their authentic self?
For those who aren't on YouTube, he just pointed the microphone at me. I was waiting for you. Okay, anyway, Alex will give the more structured answer. I'm going to just quickly share a tidbit of my own journey in this. So, this is a disclaimer again, because we are all, I really feel like this is an ongoing, lifelong journey. Not to say you won't ever find your true self, but it's like the more you spend time seeking God who made you, the more he reveals things about yourself that you never knew. And I think that's amazing, because it's just like a relationship. It's like we're married, 50 years from now, God willing, we'll still be, alive and
Yeah.
asking each other questions, discovering more things about each other. Same thing with God. Like the longer we live, the more we can discover more things about God. And I really think it's the same with yourself. Like, you're never gonna get to a point in your lifetime on earth being like, I know everything about myself now. Like, I really think it's an ongoing discovery. And also you change. Like, there's aspects of you that shift, depending on the season, life stage, circumstances. So um all that to say, I will say, like, for me, one overview of what has helped me. And again, I'm happy to share more if people are interested. Like, feel free to message or comment in on YouTube, and we can talk more about dive deep more into this in the future. But I think one thing that really helped me was when I first started doing therapy and counseling, and I think I mentioned this in previous episodes, when those people on the outside would say, Grace, you're actually being very hard on yourself, or like just making comments that help reveal the blind spots that I had always normalized. And so, I'll just share one example is I was thinking about this recently, about how I used to tell my therapist, she would ask me, so what are you doing just for yourself? And I literally looked at her like, what? That's so selfish. Why would I do anything just for myself? Everything we do should be for other people. And I was like, not much. I was like flabbergasted. I didn't know what to say.
Mm,
She helped me to realize, if I'm not doing anything for myself, there might be something wrong there. Like there might be something missing. And, if she hadn't pointed that out, I wouldn't have known something was missing because I had just been so used to, going back to Alex's example earlier, giving myself, serving others, just always focusing on other people. I never thought I even needed to be with myself. What did that even mean? What does it mean to be with myself and connect with myself? That sounds so worldly and secular, But now on the flip side, I can see how I had gotten it flipped. And I didn't know that in order to give and serve out of an overflow, you truly need to fill your own cup first. And that doesn't mean, just like read your Bible and you're good. It's like actually a work of your heart of understanding, how do I meet those areas in my heart that are longing for something that's missing, and doing it through God's love, not doing it through like your self manifestation,
Mm.
self love in the world's eyes, but like connecting with God's compassion and love. So yeah, I would say that was one of the seeds that started it. And then when I had my kind of like crisis I've talked about before, I think in episode 1 I mentioned this about how I got to a point where I felt disconnected. I was like, I don't know how to connect deeply with God anymore. Like, I'm working in full-time ministry. I am doing all the right things. There's so much fruit outwardly that's coming from the things I'm doing, but when I spend time with God, I feel like for some reason, I'm not connecting with him, and I don't know how to explain it, but it's like weird. And through that journey, I just kept leaning in and exploring, like, God, what's going on? Like, please just show me. And I think the more I just like asked God to show me, the more he revealed to me, like, there's more to you than you know. And that was scary for me because I was like, what does that even mean? I don't even know where to start. I remember January of 20, like that following year, January, I like downloaded this guide about like find your true self, but it wasn't biblical. So I was like kind of sussed out, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, but it got me, some of the questions were actually pretty helpful. Like, what lights you up? Where do you find joy? Like, what are some things that other people say about you? But then how would you describe you? Like, I think those are some questions that you could start with if you feel like you're not aligned with your true self. Like, ask yourself, how does the world perceive me? How do my closest friends perceive me? But then who do I think I am? And like, do those things match up? Because if not, then there's probably something there to like dig into about, why am I not being that version of myself that I think I am? And even if you don't know who that version is, like yourself, it's okay. It's like an ongoing process, and God will continue to show you, reveal to you things as you seek him. And this is the last thing I'll say before I pass it back to Alex. I can see him getting a little restless because I'm talking a lot, but
No, you're doing great.
but I think, yeah, something I've been thinking a lot about, and I've heard multiple, pastors and Christian, thought leaders talking about recently too. So I really feel like this is a call, not just for us individually, but like for the church, is like, don't deprive the world of who God made you to be. And in order to like, if you want to step into the fullness of who God made you to be, of the calling that he's called you to, the assignment he wants you to do, it really like it all goes back to, how do we view God? Like, how are we understanding God? Because the more we pursue God and like seek him, the more we also deeply understand who we are because he made us, if that makes sense. It's kind of like this is a really rough metaphor, but like if you were an engineer trying to figure out, this MacBook, like I want to learn everything there is about the MacBook. It would only make sense to study Apple, like the company. Like, what's their culture like? What's their DNA? What are their values? Because the things that they create reflect them, the creator. So I feel like that's a little tidbit of my journey and what I would tell people. But it's a long process, and honestly, not to be biased, but I think the best way is just to work with a trained professional such as Alex over here, who can help you
You
dissect
didn't have to plug that, but thank you.
dissect all the layers, because there are many layers. And for most people, we are not taught how to untangle the web. It's so confusing and overwhelming.
Hmm.
So when you take the step of asking someone for help to like to guide you through this, and not just any friend, because friends also are not trained and equipped on how to help you through this, but
And they're biased.
yeah, and they're biased. They have their own insecurities too. But people like Alex, like coaches or counselors, they're trained to ask you the right questions to help you get clarity and process, especially if they're Christian, spirit led, with God's guidance. Okay, that's the end of my spiel.
Well, awesome. I agree with everything that Grace
Okay.
just said. I think I don't have much else to add. But one thing I will add is more practically. I said this in the beginning that if you're living a life of lies, then you're living in accordance to Satan. I didn't say it like that, but now that it's coming out of my mouth, it seems pretty like,
He looks he looks shocked at what he said. Did you surprise yourself?
I surprise myself sometimes with the words that have come out of this mouth.
Actually, that's a sign, God's speaking through you. Sometimes I write things, like even this morning, I was like journaling God's voice, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not even thinking about what I'm writing, but it's so powerful. Okay.
It's a good thing we prayed before this.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, I'll say it again. If we're living a life of lies, we are living according to Satan. I said it better the first time. Anyways, you all get it. But related to what Grace said, I think there's a lot of lies that people have believed in, and it has been reaffirmed and yeah, just ingrained in our behaviors and our lives.
What are some examples of those lies?
Like the introvert extrovert thing, or even career paths, or I know for Gen Z, looking a certain way is really important. I mean, I think every generation, but especially with Gen Z, I see that a lot. Just trying to fit in. I mean,
Like you should be blank, or you need to be blank.
yeah, I mean, even fashion, like fitting in a certain way. Um, but I feel like asking hard questions like, okay, why do I feel like I need to be more introverted or more extroverted? Why do I feel like I have to be in this career? Why do I feel like I have to be successful? Like ask those questions, the things that are more top of mind. And in business, we ask like 5 whys to get to the root problem. Well, you can ask 5 whys to get to the root problem for yourself as well. And so when you unpeel the layers of the onion and find those lies, I would take up those lies with God and ask Him for the truth. An example is, for me, like I feel like I need to be more extroverted or I need to be more vocal because people have told me to be more vocal. Why? And just keep going down that rabbit trail. But also ask God and invite God, because God did not make mistakes on anyone. He created you in your mother's womb. But unfortunately, the world, right when we get out of the womb, the world tells us this, our parents, families, friends, and we just grow up and we are operating as children in adult bodies. So, with all that said, a really practical way is just to write down beliefs that you've held for so long and take it to God and ask Him to reveal His truth.
So good. I hope you appreciate the different communication styles that we have. Alex is so orderly and structured and nice packaged.
This is weird,
I
but whenever I talk, I literally see like a Google Doc in front of me, like bullet points, and then
Wow, that's a spiritual gift.
tab, another bullet point, indent. Like, okay, this is how I'm gonna structure my what I'm gonna say.
Someone give me that spiritual gift, because I am literally the opposite. I just I don't even know where this is going. I'm just going with it. One more thought to add on to that is, let's have a real moment talking about being real. So right now, we're recording a podcast. Okay, I just want to do this because it's kind of meta and it's just us being vulnerable, Because I was thinking about this even earlier when I was posting about how to be your authentic self, and I was posting a little bit about my journey on my Instagram. I was like, this is so ironic, because on Instagram and on social media, or any platform really, it's really, really hard. I would almost argue maybe impossible to be 100% your authentic self, because you're curating some sort of story for the other person's perception on the other end, right?
It's literally called
Um,
stories on Instagram.
yeah, exactly. So even if you're trying to be authentic, that's the irony, is like you're trying to be authentic. But then if you're not trying, then maybe you're not authentic. So all that to say is, I hope people here kind of understand our hearts of like, we know we're not perfect at this, because even us talking in front of a camera doing this podcast, I would say, and we're kind of rusty, as in we're like still trying to find our groove. But I like, would you say you're being your 100% full authentic self right now in this moment?
My authentic self is watching the new Avatar Netflix trailer
Oh my gosh, you should have
and
seen him.
looking up Dragon Ball Z videos and just being in front of my laptop or reading a book or in
Yeah.
the sauna or working out. That's my authentic self. It almost has not much to do with talking with people, maybe some deep one-on-ones here and now, but
Yeah.
yeah, not really. But I
Right.
do enjoy this though.
Yeah. So that's a good point. There's, again, going back to, just because it's not your authentic mode, your natural mode, it doesn't mean you should avoid it. Yeah. And I would say similarly, like, I actually, just to go back to my performance mentality. So I've actually noticed I'm actually quite, I will say I'm proud of myself. I'm going to celebrate that, because I feel like if you look back, which I hope no one does this because I'm going to cringe if I do this, but if you look back at our first few episodes of this podcast from a year ago, almost a year ago, I would say we were much more nervous and we were much more like stiff. Do you agree?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And I think part of it is
More sweating
because
too.
I think part of it is because I just for the longest time was so used to, okay, like if you're in front of a
Ballet.
camera, yeah, or in front of an audience, like it's time to present, it's time to say all the right things, be polished, for the sake of good production or whatever, what have you. And that stuff is not bad, I will say, but I was so trained in that mentality that um even though the style and the tone of our podcast is different from a broadcast presentation, our style is, we want it to be real, conversational as much as possible. um I had to kind of learn that as we went. And so that's one final encouragement I would give anyone, is like, if you don't even know, how do I unlearn this false self? How do I become more of my authentic self? I would say be patient with yourself and just do the things that are scary to you in terms of authenticity. Like, share, if you're afraid of sharing this vulnerable story about yourself on Instagram, or even sharing with a friend your true struggles, like confessing your sins. That's actually,
That's good practice.
confession brings healing. Confessing to God brings forgiveness. Confessing to one another brings healing. And I would say, if you're afraid of that, do it. And the more that you do it, the more you grow in it. Because I feel like that's been the case for us in the podcast. We didn't start this being like, oh my gosh, we're gonna be so real because we're so good at being real in front of the camera. Like, we're like, our goal and our heart is to be as real as possible. Of course, everything's curated to some degree on the internet, but for the purpose of the goal. But it's like, we didn't wait for the realness to become natural to us. We keep doing this to learn more about how to be more real, if that makes sense.
Amen.
So just do it. Nike. All right. So just to close up, we want to remind you guys, we have a free resource for those of you who are like, yeah, this sounds all good, but like, we don't know, or I don't know where to start. Well, before we get to the free resource, I want to say we want to run a little prize thingy. Did you see my note that I added? I'm putting Alex on the spot right
Oh, cool.
now. Okay.
I'm down.
Again, this is unedited, but yeah, I thought it'd be really cool, because since we're talking about, the importance of seeking help, to actually gift someone listening to this episode that gift. And this is priceless. This is like, you can't even put a price tag on this, because it's literally the essence of thriving as your full and free authentic self, and it's like so good. So I will say, if you want to win that, we'll gift one person a free session with Alex, who's going to help you start to peel those layers and start to find who your authentic self is and step into that. We invite you to comment in the YouTube comments below. I forgot to come up with a prompt. What should they comment? Comment
Free. Dumb.
freedom.
Yeah,
Yes. Freedom. Plus anything else that you would like to add to that, if you appreciate. What do you appreciate, or what do you want to see more of from this podcast? How's that? Like, what do you want to see more of in terms of style, in terms of topic, anything? Just give us some feedback, plus the word freedom.
What if they're not watching it on YouTube?
You can comment on our voices. I'm just kidding. We're not going to adjust our voices for you. No, just topics. Like, just give us topics. Oh, yeah, you have to go on YouTube, because you can't comment on Spotify or anything. So you have to go on YouTube to enter this giveaway, and just give us some feedback plus the word freedom. And we will pick somebody to gift a free session with Alex to find your true authentic self. So good.
Yeah. I've helped someone this week make a very pivotal career decision.
Spicy.
Mind-blowing. And I've helped someone break free from disassociation for like the past 5 years, where she thought she lost her life.
Dang.
Like, lost herself.
Wow.
Not lost her life. But although there were moments where it felt that way.
This reminds me that one of the key ingredients to finding your true authentic self is to marry someone like Alex. Just kidding. No pressure. But I think for me, that's helped me so much, because he provides the safety for me to be my full self. Thank God.
You definitely need safety in marriage.
Yeah, in general.
And relationships.
Yes.
Anyways.
So
would you like to wrap up?
Yes. The last thing is Divine Priority Planner. So we've talked about this before, but we wanted to make sure you don't miss it, because this is about aligning yourself. We're not just talking about worldly advice here, like be your, true self apart from God. We want to do everything with God. And that includes how you prioritize your work, your responsibilities, the things that you say yes and no to, the people you say yes or no to, when they ask you for things or want to hang out and you have limited time and bandwidth and energy. And so part of being your true authentic self is learning, what do I say yes to? What do I say no to, with God's guidance and his discernment leading me? And so we really want to encourage you, if you haven't yet, go to withthetrans.com/planner. It's also going to be linked maybe in the description. But if you go to
will be.
Okay. If you go to withthetrans.com/planner, that's where you can download this for free. It's a free resource. We just really want to get into your hands, because we know it's going to help more and more people to live aligned and free and not burdened by the weights that God never asked you to carry. So that's it. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Yes, see you guys.